afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the River Management Society and one of our River Management Roundtable sessions. We're going to be talking about best practices that have been adopted in the last couple of very special years that we have come upon and may carry forward for the reasons we'll talk about. So the River Management Roundtable today, as we do twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesdays, we welcome everyone who works on rivers, but particularly the people whose jobs are what you're looking at. Everyone's welcome, and your input is always really helpful and probably different than some of the other people who are joining us. So thanks for being here. The folks who will be having something to say today are Dave Cernicek. Dave, you want to wave? Oh, I guess your name is on the screen. From Bridger Teton National Forest, and John Kresge from the Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area in Colorado, and Angie Furman, our River Training Coordinator, River Training Center Coordinator, Becca, Communications Coordinator, and me, Lisa, the Executive Director of River Management Society.
So before we kind of get started today, we just, as Risa was saying, this is kind of like a time for everyone to be able to share out. It's not super formal, so we'd love to know who's with us and do some introductions. So we might just go around. I might just call on people from my screen for the sake of time, but yeah, if you could share with us your name, your organization, your first river, your favorite river, that would be awesome. So I guess I'll start it off. I'm Angie Furman. Again, as Risa mentioned, I'm the River Training Center Coordinator at RMS. My first river, at least for boating on, rafting on, was the San Juan River in Utah. And my favorite river, that's always changing, but I enjoyed the Rogue River, which is just in my backyard, so among many others. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with Tom Waters.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and I can turn off the screen share real quick, that way we can see each other.
Hi, I'm Tom Waters. I'm with the Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area in Salida. My first river was the Yampa, and my favorite is probably the Arkansas.
Thanks for joining, Tom. How about Taryn Chaya? All right, we might come back to Taryn. How about Sarah Bursky?
Hi everyone, Sarah Bursky here with National Park Service Wild and Scenic Rivers Program based in Philadelphia. My first river was not a paddle river, but it was growing up along the Schuylkill River here in Philadelphia. My favorite rivers are probably up in New England, where I spent the last 10 or so years before moving back down here. Thanks.
Thanks for joining, Sarah. All right, Monica.
Hey, I'm Monica Morin, and I work for the Central Oregon Field Office. I don't think my camera's turning on. Here we go.
There we go.
I work on the John Day River, and my first river was the Kennebec in Maine, where I grew up, and my favorite is the Salt down in Arizona.
Awesome, thanks, Monica. And I just saw that Taryn doesn't have a microphone, but she put in the chat that at the moment, she, right, with Southern Indian Tribe, and their first river was the St. John's in Florida, and favorite has to be the Animas. All right, how about Liz Lacey?
Hi there, Liz Lacey. I'm also with the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program with the National Park Service, and I work primarily in the New England area. I would have to say that my first river, it's really hard to nail that one down, but I'll go for a real interesting coincidence, and that is the Charles River in Boston, paddling up in the headwaters of the Charles. And then right now, my favorite river is the Charles because I happen to be spending a lot of time not on it, but doing a lot of biking around it. So just hard to pick a favorite.
Mhm. Thanks, Liz. All right, Kevin.
Sure, Kevin Colburn. I'm with American Whitewater. I think my first whitewater river that I paddled was the Lehigh. And lately I've been kind of especially enamored with the Middle Fork Flathead and everything that flows into it.
Thanks, Kevin. How about Jared?
My name is Jared Becker. I'm with the Snake River Fund here in Jackson, Wyoming. My first rivers were floating on. Not hearing you, Jared.
Speak up, Jared.
Kind of quiet.
Yeah, we couldn't quite hear you, Jared. So feel free to put it in the chat too. All right, how about John Newman?
So I'm with the Forest Service on the Rogue River. My first river I paddled was a Flint River in Georgia. I was like 7. So I guess my favorite river right now is probably the Echo down south on the Oregon border.
Awesome. All right. And then do Dave and Cernicek?
Hi, I'm David Cernicek. I'm the Wild and Scenic River Coordinator for the Snake River Headwaters designation on the Bridger Teton National Forest in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. First river was the Yampa Green, early 80s. And I have a hard time with your favorite river question because I like so many of them. But I'll go with the Hoback, tributary to the Snake south of town here that's easy to get to and a lot of fun when there's water in it.
Thanks, Dave. And John Kresge.
Yeah, John Kresge with the Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area, and I'm the rationing agreement coordinator for all the commercial contracts here on the Arkansas. First river would probably be where I grew up in middle Nebraska on the Platte River, and favorite river I just got off of Gates of Lador, so I thought that was pretty special.
Nice. And then Risa and Becca, I don't know if either of you want to chime in.
Oh, my first, Risa and I worked with River Management Society in Tacoma Point, Maryland. My first river that I remember where I learned to fish was on the Delaware River and near the Water Gap. And my favorite river is on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee, the Watauga River. Beautiful river down there.
Hey, I'm Becca Price with the River Management Society, and my first river was either the Hiwassee or the Ocoee. Favorite river is the Nolichucky, also on the border of North Carolina, Tennessee.
And then I also saw Jared added into the chat. He's with the Snake River Fund, and first river was the Farmington in Connecticut, and his favorite is whatever river he's on in the moment. Cool. So let me go back to the screen share, and then I think Risa, you're gonna.
Yeah, just to kick off our discussion, we have been wondering if all those hordes of new river users that have broken all records and exceeded all visitorship numbers what they would be doing this year. And it turns out they all came back. So since last year was pretty extraordinary, we thought, well, there's some things that we learned or had to do to accommodate last year that we brought forward to this year. And if assuming many of the people return again, what have we learned? Besides doing Zoom meetings, we've all learned how to do that. So just a variety of topics, and would love to, please feel free to chat or unmute yourself and join the conversation, because that's what this is, and because there are a lot of really experienced people here, or we've heard stories of others who have talked about some of these essentially COVID-borne best practices. So just some things to get this started. What did you think would change but did not? You know, as you're listening to folks, what did you think would not change but did? And then did you experience something that just really was very surprising related to the visitorship? And also, did any relationships with those with whom you manage or for whom you manage your river change because of what we were kind of forced to do or new opportunities that we learned about? So just kind of keep those in mind. If anyone wants to jump in and say, oh my gosh, this is significant, please do chat or unmute yourself. But we'll just go through some specific examples, and we're going to have Dave and John kind of tag team a couple of specific types of changes or accommodations that we encountered or decided to do or change.
Our biggest action this year was it always is on the Snake River headwaters is in the Snake River Canyon, south of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and we always do in the hundreds of thousands of people. So we're a pretty busy river. 2020, we had a lot more of, being absolutely terrified of a disease we didn't know anything about, and very tight management, not wanting to have any exposure for employees, and trying to balance that with serving the public that was coming and have facilities open for people that really needed to get out of the house. For us in the Forest Service, we, at least like my outfitters in the canyon and us, worked last year to have some really tight requirements of their operations and what we were doing at our facilities, and like how many companies we could have on a boat ramp at a time, that type of stuff. Then we really worked out having big precautions. When the spring hit here, my agency, the Forest Service, became very clear that we'd have absolutely nothing to do with any precautions. People just needed to follow our local and state public health issues, which was very different for us than the previous years. Is we didn't feel like we had as full a toolbox to keep ourselves first and foremost, our team second most, and the public safe from having disease spread. And we also we had outfitters that were very comfortable with things that were going on, that process they were doing. So one thing we did was, we took down anything that the Forest Service would require folks to do, but outfitters that were operating with special things that had asked for special accommodations, like, bringing a special, letting customers bring a vehicle down to the river, or having an extra boat to spread customers out more, those types of things that we did in 2020, outfitters could still do that again this year for COVID issues. But we felt like we had a lot more people, but people were not as nasty and toxic as 2020 this year. They're a little more just excited to be here and be out and feel like we're getting to the end of COVID, and they're just happy to be here, and they were a lot kinder with my folks. The other big thing we did, some of the other big things we did this year was, we worked a lot more on our personal communication skills before we went out to meet the public. And, a lot of that, everybody got a copy of Verbal Judo. And, we did scenarios. We worked through a lot of things before we got out there. We also use our partners like Snake River Fund a great deal more. That our Jared here can do a lot more with the public than I can, and say things that I can as an agency person. And he has a lot more authority sometimes to say things about, hey, this is what needs to happen down at the river. This is what's going on. This is what we need to do to make it easier for the Forest Service to leave these facilities open. And so that's a huge help to have partners. Snake River Fund also provided us with "Don't cramp the ramp" signs and things like that sort of helped in our greater progress to keep people kind of mellower. And one thing we worked hard on, started last year, is really setting the experience before people come to the river. And to the point of actually just putting it out there in the press that this weekend's going to be a miserable, crowded mess, like you see in the picture. And so expect this mess. And if there's somewhere else you can go. But if you're going to come down, expect it to be basically crowded and not as much fun if you don't like crowds. And so setting people's experience levels, what to expect when they get here, up before they get here, they don't come to the river expecting a nice empty solitude experience. And that absolutely helps. John, you got anything?
Yeah, so obviously the private boater scene is increasing. People are buying boats, trailers, the gear to do it. If they're getting familiar with harder sections, they are taking chances. But per the management plan, the Arkansas AHRA's management plan, we do have a capacity on private boaters. Last year, we put an effort to redistribute some of those days in Browns Canyon, and with the help of some clubs, Colorado Whitewater and other clubs, to kind of preset some dates that try to avoid in Browns Canyon. And we put those out there, and that was achieved because those numbers did drop below that 75% threshold of the capacity. Although we did pick up 2 new days later in the month of June, and that followed around the FIBARC event. So that program of educating private boaters and the word getting out, private boaters do not want a permit system, not even to the next phase of what the management plan would put in as a voluntary permit system, just so we get a grasp of the numbers. But the word did get out. We avoided those days that we kind of highlighted as high use days, and felt that was really successful. So we'll probably be continuing that because Browns Canyon is a destination for a lot of Colorado visitors, boaters, just because it's a national monument and it is a great ride. So we'll probably continue with that indefinitely just because of the increase of private boaters.
Anybody have something to add? Anything new they saw out there?
I will add that we did have to, with that parking picture you see there, we did have to get down into Hecla Junction, which is a midday, the half-day takeout in the Browns Canyon. And I think, I don't know if Tom can correct me on that, but 1 or 2 days we had to turn people away. There is no parking, so we had to turn them away to prop their shuttle up. So, but the rest of it was pretty much on the in the field, on the ramps, squeezing people in, finding spaces as best you could, and directing traffic. So
that is one thing that definitely jumps, finding places to put people on a busy day is, something that I think all of us deal with, and we will never have enough parking places for the 4th of July or other special days like that during the summer. And for us, it's just, we have kind of the make it work days. We don't write parking tickets, but we just need, as long as you're not blocking the flow of traffic, and a bus full of outfitted guests or a ambulance or a response vehicle can get in and out of a site, we kind of just generally live with that. We make our areas they absolutely not ever parking spots. We try and paint those red and put up ugly signs, and make sure we watch for people trying to occupy those spots. But there is those days where people are going to be somewhere. If we can just get them to somewhere where they're not blocking access to the facility, that's an important thing. Foreseeing that we're going to have people parking outside our facility and trying to get our highway department out there to mow on the side of the roads where they're going to be parking with really hot catalytic converters is a super help. Otherwise, we have fires when people start parking in the boonies. But being proactive in this stuff, we now use those little utility marker things, those little flowers or whatever that they knock into the ground, like mark something when you're going to dig something up, so you don't put a backhoe through your utility lines or whatever. We use those to line our parking spots in trailer parking and head-in parking and that type of stuff, because we have so many dirt lots. If you can make parking lines somewhere, at least some of our sites, we doubled and beyond doubled our parking just by delineating parking spaces. Otherwise, people make their own parking places, and you lose all the functionality of stuff. Where normally I have, without lines, I have 5 trucks and trailers that can park together before the space is used up. If we put the lines of the little utility markers down, just like their traffic or parking lines, we can double that amount and have 10 vehicles with trailers in that spot. And we're not able to increase our footprint of our facilities without going to a lot of trouble, and we don't necessarily have the desire to do that, but we can use our space better. And figuring out whether we need a new flow or with certain things belong somewhere better is a really good thing to sit down and do. And if you can provide lines for people to park by, you can get more people into your area without having them start crossing highways and running back and forth. But yeah, there's things you can do. Did anybody come on anything this summer that was genius level? Pat yourself on the back stuff you want to share? Come on.
Hey, this is Tom Waters. There's no genius operating out of this office here, but we had to, we just learned that we needed to dedicate some staff to those busy areas and have them in place, because it's real similar to what Dave is saying in that if we weren't there for the beginning of the rush, we would just lose countless numbers of spots to people just ditching their car and trailer somewhere, and that would screw us up for the rest of the day. So we really tried to be targeted and calculated in the times that we were at ramps and having people in place to assist people with their parking choices, and that seemed to help quite a bit and ward off some of the issues we had last season.
That's a great point. Just like bathrooms, it only takes one to screw the whole place up.
Tom, this is Risa. Could you share, John, the numbers that you guys saw this year on the Arkansas? Because they're pretty darn impressive.
I'll let John do the commercial stuff. I can tell you that in June this year, our visitation counts, which is our vehicle counters, we were up 37,000 people just in the month of June that we counted. Now, that's not all river users, but there is a high percentage of that. Our budget right now, or our revenue right now, is tracking to be 20% ahead of where we were at last year. So I think we're definitely going to see higher numbers both in visitation and in revenue this year. And John can talk about the commercial outfitters and their numbers.
Yeah, I don't have my trip logs in from the outfitters yet, but what I'm hearing is anywhere from that 25% to 35% up. One outfitter normally puts about 17,000 paying clients down. He added another 10,000, so 27,000. And again, all these outfitters are doing it with limited staff. There's a hiring need in the valley from bus drivers to guides. So how they pulled it off, either increasing the load size on their boats or running more trips per day, they did a good job of accommodating to that increase of 25% at least. Private boaters, like I said, we count private boaters by photograph because we have so many sections that we can't catch everybody at a put in or a takeout. Like one of the big days was that June 19th of we had 243 boats. So times that by an average of 3 or 4 people per boat, we're in that 600-700 people of just private boaters that day. So we're seeing sections, and you can tell by the bathroom usage of how many times we have to pump and fill toilet paper. So we'll get the numbers in January when I post those. I get the reports in December and then post them in January. So it is going to be, I think, a record year all the way around.
Great. Thanks, John.
that all those are big issues, at least on my rivers. We had a lot to deal with this summer. You know, one of our big things was fires. We went to early fire bans just because we didn't have the personnel to either staff our fires or, but we didn't have them to staff our forests. We didn't have many people working in dispersed areas. We're still in that world of dwindling budgets while our use exponentially goes up. This year was a massive year of a lot more people camping. As I said before, I think, we had more people this year, but they weren't as toxic and nasty to deal with. And we had a lot of folks that were real nice to each other and, let people camp next to them and stuff like that when we'd have drainages fill up, but we definitely filled up a lot of drainages. And, one thing we're finding is, we actually are having to put, physical barriers in to keep people from, getting vehicles all the way to the banks of wild and scenic rivers because, they don't necessarily have any flags that go up when they're getting too close to the river, and they will just park right in the river or, tear up the riparian or that type of stuff. And so it's more difficult stuff and kind of figuring out where our campsites are and where we're not going to have camping, and because of too big impacts is another workload. And something we find challenging, at least in, I'm in a resort area, so we also always fight the battle of people trying to live near Jackson Hole, where, a one-bedroom apartment is, $5,000 a month in the summer. There's not enough room for people to live, and we have a huge amount of people trying to live on the forest, which is always generally down by a stream, is a preferred place. So it's a constant thing to be able to afford to get rid of the garbage, get the garbage in the can, deal with human waste issues, get toilets pumped, all that type of stuff. This year was more difficult than any, just for the lack of resources compared to the amount of people coming at us. And our secret, quiet little places we never want anybody to know about are getting filled, as well as, just highway pullouts where you think nobody would spend the night but a trucker. But when there's nothing else left, it's amazing where people will sleep. And the implications from that is, they're nowhere near any place to go to the bathroom, and the impacts are pretty giant. And we are leaning more and more on our partners to help us get through some of these things, and getting toilets donated, but also we can put in toilets now, but we can find funding for a toilet, but we can't necessarily guarantee that we'll have the ability to maintain and pump it in the future. That's, a really difficult world to be in management, trying to do the right thing when you can't do the right thing. Yeah, lots more camping, lots more garbage, and dealing with fires. Having a campfire ban is a lot of extra work into the evening, and takes a lot more hours out of people that are already starting to burn out on you by the beginning of July.
So we're talking about what best practices we found. So you mentioned partners donating. Did partners donate porta potties?
We've actually, our friends at the BT have raised money to pay for additional CXT toilets in some of our busier places, and the maintenance of them for future years. So that's a really nice thing. It's really hard, people want to donate things that are really nice and good things to take your picture in front of, and be putting a shovel into the ground. Toilets are never the sexy thing to donate money for. So yeah, that's a big coup if you can get somebody to give you a toilet, $25,000, $30,000 toilet. But yeah, we've had that occur. We've had huge help from folks like Jared on the Snake River Fund. Him and his coworker came out and just mapped campsites. We don't even know how many campsites we had in Granite Creek, Wild Scenic River corridor, and just that type of stuff that we can at least start accounting for and finding exactly where things are happening, where the impacts are. Partners are a huge piece that they really want to help, and being able to say, yes, this is a specific help that I need, and as the government, we tend to push partners away without really listening to them or listening to what they're willing to do for you. And there's just amazing stuff that's possible if you're willing to work with them and not get all bound up by weird perceptions or feel like you can't meet with them after your workday is over at 5 p.m., stuff like that. There's amazing groups and amazing volunteers out there that can do stuff. And yeah, one of our big things this year is having volunteers out in the backcountry where we couldn't afford to have people, and it makes a huge difference.
Great, thanks. Jared, do you want to jump in on that as his partner, I guess? You're able to comment?
Yeah, he was quiet last time.
Yeah, he was quiet. All right. Moving on.
Oh, who doesn't want to talk about toilets?
You're on a roll.
That's amazing. That we actually someone can afford to put in the toilets in the ground. That the what we have in this area is a lot of Chinese tour buses, and Grand Teton Yellowstone usually put out their counts during the summer of how many toilets seats get broken by people who are perching on them to go to the bathroom. And you know, it's usually in the 80s, 90s, 100s, whatever. Where do you find that picture, Risa?
This was it was from Yellowstone, but it was also, this is kind of crazy, but it was in conjunction with a Salt Lake City Tribune headline that says, "Are Asians breaking our toilets?" And then it was alluding to the that these facilities were, you know, toilet seats were getting broken, and also mentioning that that Yellowstone, the bottom two were from Yellowstone or Arches. So they're beginning to use the kinds of facilities that folks who were standing on the toilets are used to when they're at home. It's not just East Asia. You know, they use these in France and stuff. But anyway, it's the tour buses. The tour bus people were breaking the toilets. I thought it was very interesting.
That is really interesting that they make them now. They gotta be twice the price.
That's either Yellowstone or Arches. I can remember.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can, Jared.
I've got garbages for computers here, so thanks. Just following up on what David was saying, you know, I think one of the things that is interesting here in the Upper Snake is that we're seeing, without a doubt, use expanding up into the tributaries and off of the main stem of the Snake, and that use is everything from dispersed camping to boating use, and that's not, you know, unique to the Bridger Teton or this watershed, but without like hard data, there's no doubt that it's exploded in the last 2 years. And the Snake River Fund was happy to work with the BT and a grad student to try to document some of the campsite use on one of the wild and scenic tributaries. And I think that that's going to be really important to do moving forward, so that we're not having vehicles drive like pretty much into the river corridor, or not necessarily the corridor, but to the river itself. And that, you know, campsites can be developed and managed appropriately moving forward, still providing access, but doing it in a more sustainable way than it's been done in the past. And I think that's a real challenge that we're going to be faced with for many years to come.
So John and Tom, you guys can talk about this. This is sort of, it's happening elsewhere, but this is your place.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we started to work towards this life jacket loaner station at Salida Whitewater Park, and it's expanded into Buena Vista and down to Canyon City, where they have their whitewater parks. Majority of these life jackets come from are donated by outfitters that are still serviceable, but yet are going to be reclaimed to this program. And so the program, of course, all these jackets are donated. Some are donated by funds that we buy them. And they're there for different sizes for all the people at the whitewater parks. Of course, we do have a regulation that you do have to wear a life jacket if you're swimming in the park or if you're doing on an inner tube. And so it's been a very successful program. Of course, we lose jackets. Once in a while, people will take them home, but we haven't run out of them. Tom was just mentioning me today that somebody is starting to leave helmets at the loaner stations. And so these loaner stations that definitely have, you'll see the increase of people getting in the river. And Tom and I were talking about sometimes that's not such a great thing that, hey, we're providing you this life jacket and we're only providing the type 5 jackets. So they have the pillow on it. But it's encouraging more people to get into the river. And of course, people are showing up with, oh, this Walmart special ski jacket or something. And so people are willing to get in the river, but if they haven't experienced a high mountain river before, some of them are having issues. And of course, we had to respond to a couple of issues at the river that really they shouldn't have been in the river, number one. But here it is, people are playing in the river, so that almost encourages them to get in the river. If you're with a group and they say, come on, Aunt Jane, why don't you get in the river too? Well, Aunt Jane is not physically fit for the river. And so we've had some incidents where that comes down to where Aunt Jane needs some medical assistance. Talking about life jackets, the Coast Guard has moved to their label system, and that's caused some rewrite in our language of our river outfitter licensing. So it's something that probably everybody's starting to experience, that Coast Guard made up a new labeling system that it's kind of confusing. So that will probably be going on to our board just so people get educated about what type of life jacket you should be wearing. If you are in a whitewater setting, that if you're not just floating on a lake. So they've gone to Newtons, and if you're familiar with it, it's starting to cause a little bit of confusion of these labeling icons. If you're 50 Newtons, 70 Newtons, near the shore, away from shore. And so our river outfitter licensing is trying to rewrite it so people can be in compliance of wearing the right jacket. Because of course everything is based off the type 1 through 5 jackets right now. So that's something on our river outfitter license that we're trying to address so that everybody's in compliance with the right jacket to wear. But the program has taken off. It's very successful. There's more people in the river with them. Tubing, we do have rental tubes at these whitewater parks. So people are getting to test their ability, and they're finding out that the cold water at Mountain Stream is cold. I don't know if Tom, you have any more to share?
Do you have people picking them up in one location and dropping them off in another, or you're meant for just go out in the water, come back and put them?
Yeah, our whitewater parks are a couple tenths of a mile long. So of course, Buena Vista is 30 miles up and Canyon City is 30 miles. We don't tag them for where they're supposed to be returned, but pretty much, it's the setting that people see them getting them on, they're going to return them where they got them. So it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add to that is John and I were talking about it this morning with providing those life jackets, if that's encouraging people to get into the river. And I think that maybe, but the majority of people are there and they're going to get in the river. And so for us to have that resource for them to do it safer, I think far outweighs that potential risk of us encouraging somebody to get into the river that might not necessarily do it. The whitewater parks have just been incredibly busy here and in Canyon City and in Buena Vista. Just a number of people that we have seen at the whitewater park on any given day in the afternoon is kind of mind blowing. It looks like there's a festival going on down there, but really it's just people hanging out. So it's super popular, and the loaner stations have been really well received by both the visitors and the community.
Is your regulation for life jackets, is that AHRA regs or what?
There is an AHRA specific regulation for life jacket use in the whitewater parks.
Okay, thanks.
Any other thoughts from folks who are here of something that you picked up or invented or you modified this last year or two? I think you'll continue in any of these type topics. You know, Leslie, you deal with so many outfitters. Are there things that you might have heard of people starting to do? And I guess on the Green or Colorado, if you're there.
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer for you at this point, but we are working with the BLM because they've been experiencing quite a few changes as well upstream, and so I'm hoping to get together with them this winter and kind of discuss, the past 2 years and some of these changing patterns and behaviors, and have a little bit more comprehensive overview of how these past 2 years have gone.
Thanks. And you mean mainly more people and more types of people, or more types of craft that they're
Yeah, increase in visitation, and I think also we've seen a lot more private users. We've seen a lot more private use that maybe isn't as experienced, or maybe are new to national parks. That's definitely true of the parks, but for the river, yeah, maybe a little bit more inexperienced folks. It just not always knowing about all the requirements and regulations and things like that.
That's a pretty common theme, besides perhaps not knowing how to deal with water temperature and fluctuation and weather impacts.
Yeah, and we have a pretty gnarly takeout boat ramp as well, and so that's been tricky for us, especially with new users who've never taken out at that location before. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more cohesive response at the end of this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. How about John? Are you seeing new? You're regulated, but did you experience impacts of new type users? People coming down in new type boats on the Rogue?
No, our use is about the same here. Because it is permanent. It's more after permit season that we're getting more use, and then we're getting more issues with our scat machine, in this parking and stuff like that here. Because our scat machine's 25 years old, so it's kind of a water issue with it. Just straight line pipe straight into it. So that's an issue that we're having.
Mm-hmm.
I have one thing, this is Kevin, it's a little different, but we just added a fire map to our list of trip planning tools because fire is such a huge role right now with the closures that happen, and just public safety of trying to avoid fires when you go around the West and paddle. And I think that, documenting the closures associated with fires, I think has been helpful for the paddling community. And I think it's just a sign of, climate change that American Whitewater had to add a fire map to our trip planning. Like we wouldn't have even dreamed of that 10 years ago. And now it's an essential piece of summer travel planning for everyone. And, what it's done is the fires have moved people around from one trip to another. So you have people that are both trying to find where to go because everything reservable is reserved, and everything that has a lottery you lose. You know, if you're the everyday person, and then you're also running from fires. So I think it's just yet another thing that tends to condense people. You know, if the main salmon is on fire, then people go to the flathead, you know, and or whatever it is. I mean, fill in the blank. So it's been interesting to try to figure out how to help people find where they can go and have a safe, fun experience, you know, and still get some solitude too.
You're right, Kevin. And that's come up a couple times this summer. I've had calls from different forest supervisors and their fire people of, you know, trying to figure out whether they need to put, you know, a river plan, a river piece into their fire plan of, you know, a lot of times, I guess, you know, through the decades, it's just sort of been go along with things and play it by ear and pull people off the river or cancel the permits or whatever. They don't have a set thing. And I think that's something that we're drifting towards, in that, you know, fire planners should be looking at, you know, if we cut across this ridge, then probably, you know, if it comes over here, then we probably need to start thinking about getting, you know, not having any more launches on the river, or having people bring a few days of extra food. I've been taking off the salmon before, and you know, some people have been put in fire camps because they can't make it all the way out to the highway. I've been escorted out by the law enforcement quickly, and, you know, pack up your stuff, we're getting out of here right now. But that is, you know, definitely has always been an issue all over the salmon chalice. And but yeah, there's a lot more, you know, I think we're going towards having trigger points of, you know, and putting that into planning of, this is where we're going to just start not having any more people launch, or this is where we're going to send jet boats up to start warning people that they need to just get behind the oars and start moving their butts down the river, and, you know, not spend 6 days. We're going to spend 2 more days on this section of river and get people out of the corridor. We worry a whole lot about upsetting people over this stuff, but, you know, it is definitely a life and death thing. You know, tough part about, like, the salmon is it falls on 5 different forests, and you know, there's so many people intertwined with the management. It gets messy, but it's a bigger reality on every forest, and, you know, the fire itself may not be what's shutting down things or affecting river operations, but it's happening. And
Seems like a lot of times it's staffing, right? Like a lot of the closures we see now are like, you know, they're, you know, 10% of the land being closed has any chance of being affected by the fire, but it's more just the staff of the agency. I assume the staff of the agencies are just maxed out, and they have to kind of prevent additional fires and you know, prevent their need to be somewhere. You know, they're big, and that has implications on capacity elsewhere. You know, if you're closing rivers that could be open, then people aren't going there, and they're all going to a smaller and smaller pot of rivers in the fire season. So it's this interesting balance, and like how intentional those choices are and how much consideration there is of capacity. I don't know. But it's a hard new challenge, I think, that the agencies are facing and the public is experiencing.
It's definitely going to be a bigger part, I think, of affecting river management issues in the future. Just, you know, we never had a million acre burn until last year, when we had 3 of them. My wife just got off the Dixie Fire, and they've already spent over $500 million on one fire. It just, I mean, it's mind-boggling how many resources are going to this type of stuff. But yeah, it's our reality right now.
I threw the fire map in the chat.
Hopefully we can participate in it and help guide it to do the right thing, and not be across the board just shut things down. Because that's, you know, that's very common in the Southwestern and Colorado and California. National forests is just shut the whole thing down and call it good. And I don't think that's always necessarily the answer. But yeah,
Kevin, that's great. Are you just crowdsourcing, or Streamkeeper, AW volunteer populating the map?
No, it's all publicly available data. So we basically just put our river data on the map, along with a bunch of government data on fire. And it's all real time.
It changes in real time. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think we'll build this into our site probably in the future. Now it's kind of a standalone thing, but I think it's just kind of the new normal now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Any other thoughts or contributions about changes this year? Monica, how about you? Anything that you changed that you're gonna keep or got rid of and you're gonna never bring back?
Well, we implemented our limited entry at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. So that's been really interesting, but I think it was put in just in time because I think if we didn't have our limited entry in, we would have been completely flooded. One change we saw between 2020 and 2021 is in 2020, people were doing really long trips. So our stay limit's 14 days, and we don't ask people to commit to how long they're going to stay on the river. It's just when they're putting in. So we found in 2020 that people were doing really long trips, but then now this year, people have got back to almost the normal average of 5-day trips. So I think people were staying 14 days quite often last year. So we're starting to settle back into almost normal. And then our group size has increased, but I think that's a factor of going to a limited entry system, higher group size, because there's less availability of permits. So because most of our use is overnight, we're not seeing a lot of what you guys are seeing. I'm sure on the lower Deschutes they are, but on the John Day, we have that limited entry permit system. We're controlled because of water on either end of our season. Maybe April we'll be seeing increases, but that might be secondary to COVID, but I think it's also because we put in a limited entry system. The delineating parking spots, I think I'll propose for next year. I think that's going to be really good because our biggest problem this year was parking at Clarno, one of our more popular launch sites. And we had people across the bridge, walking across the highway. So I think we're doing okay because of our limits on the John Day, our season limits and our permit system.
Well, Leslie asked a couple questions, Monica. Did you limit the number of launches per day or the number of launches per year? You said there are more people per permit. Could you just explain a little bit?
So on the John Day, we have a limited entry season that runs from May 1st through July 15th, and it's limited per launches. So again, it's just controlled by that one day that you launch, and then you can stay for up to 14 days from there. And then our limits are 16 people per permit. Does that answer the question? So the rest of the year outside of that limited season, it's no limits. We have no limits at all. But we also have no water.
Right.
That's another discussion.
Yeah, it's a weird water year, and a lot of people went pre-season on the main salmon because it was reasonably low water before the permit season even started. So you end up with more and more people getting outside of the permit season when flow conditions are often suboptimal. So you end up in a situation where you have suboptimal solitude and suboptimal water right outside of the permit season, not on the John Day in particular, just in general now.
Well, we did a trip
we have a slew of reservoirs. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We did a trip on the Selway, a personal trip last year, the day after permit season ended. And I believe they only allow one private launch per day normally. And we launched 20 groups the day after permit season. And I'm guilty of sin because I was one of them, but.
I've been there. Yeah, I've done that. It's a great trip, actually.
But yeah, we have so many places in the West that have reservoirs with, less than 30% of gross pool or whatever. I don't know what irrigators are planning to use next year, and I don't think we're going to get these reservoirs back up anywhere close to even half. And so it's going to be a really interesting water year next year.
Have you guys heard any talk, just because of the dynamic that you were just mentioning of people, just showing up en masse as soon as permit season's over, of any discussion of extending the permit seasons? That scary thought, maybe.
Those are, that
popularity.
A lot of that is wrapped up in management plans. That's, requires a lot more work than just, using some whiteout and adding a few more weeks. It's, it's a serious problem out there. I didn't get a multi-day trip in this year. I don't know if I got one in last year. It's, when I started boating, there was less than 1,000 people competing for, those less than 1,000 permits. Now there's over 30,000 on some rivers competing for those 1,000 permits, and it's just ugly. And we're not creating more rivers or campsites or anything else. And people are making a lot of demands and think we should open up permitting and double the numbers of permits and stuff like that. But they're just, where do you put those people? There's not capacity.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I don't know what the solution is. Other than
So
not teach your friends to boating.
on the John Day, we do have the ability in our management plan to extend the permit season. It's unlikely we would extend it past in the summer, but prior to, because our April, now it seems like the water, at least this year, April was a great water year. It was a much better water year than our limited season. So maybe as things change with the world, we might have to extend our permit season further. And we have that ability to do that. And then the crux for us is that transition. April 30th is the last day of our permit season. Then May 1st, we have a limited season. So trying to build in a system that can deal with that. And one of the options we were talking about is limiting layover days if you're launching the last week of April. And we have those abilities to do that within our management plan.
Yeah, sounds like a reasonable thing to consider. Maybe not from the permittees standpoint. They want to have more flexibility, but going early. So, and then of course you've got staffing. If you extend your season, you've got to have people be there to work. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour. Becky, you want to take us home here?
Yep. So just a reminder, we do the roundtables in 2 tracks. The first Tuesday of the month is on the river, so that is the one we're in now. And then the next one we have coming up is in our workplace culture track. We record the on the river topics, which is the one today. You can find those in the River Management video channel. I will share the link to the River Training Center webpage, and there's a link there. So lots of awesome past discussions to check out. And then on September 27th is our next roundtable. We're going to be getting into communicating successfully in different or unfamiliar situations. So we'll kind of be exploring what code switching is and why we do it, and upsides and downsides to that. That one is going to be on a Monday, not a Tuesday. So go ahead and mark your calendars and register for that. We'd love to have you join us. And Angie, do you want to get into other trainings we have coming up?
Yeah, I'll just remind everyone to check out our training center page. We're continuously updating it. We've got all sorts of things coming up this fall, including for young professionals or entry-level professionals. We've got a seminar or like a virtual discussion series starting on this Thursday. We've got a workshop coming up next month focusing on restoration techniques in the Chesapeake Bay, but options for virtual as well. So we've got lots of fun things coming up this fall. So go check out the Training Center webpage.
And we just want to thank everybody for coming today, and especially Dave and John for helping plan and host this discussion. Seems like a lot has gone back to normal, but a lot has changed and will probably continue to. So thanks for sharing how you guys are adapting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
John,
Thanks, everybody.
apologies for goofing up your.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.